This week, no gameplay with Rigo. Rigo's a cool card. We're just gonna be swinging shit sideways and see what happens.
What up, YouTube? It's your boy Kai, aka Fervent Alchemist, and I'm back again with another deck tech for you. We got Supreme Bant. It is Rigo, Streetwise mentor. The reason why I call it Supreme Bant because he's the streetwear
Come on now,
mentor.
dog.
You get it? As per the primer,
Supreme is the best, so I put Supreme on my shirt, it's on my chest. You gotta have Supreme or you will be a hater, cause you know Supreme is super elevated.
I recommend checking out that video, you feel me? So we got Supreme Bant here. The idea behind it was, try to play the best cards to synchronize with Rigo, but also play well individually on their own. There's no excuse for Ornithopter. It's just, zero drop attacker. If I get a turn 1 Rigo, I want to have that out. There's no excuse. Other than everything else here, they're a dork, or a counter spell on a stick, or you draw cards, or you see cards. But everything else is just a 1-drop because Rigo says here, whenever you attack a player or planeswalker with 1 or more creatures with power 1 or less, draw a card. And Rigo itself is a 2/2, which is a big fat L from Wizards. Take that L, hold it proudly. Rigo should have been a 1/3 or a 0/4. We got Ornithopter here. Like I said, it could come down turn 1, just slap it down. Turn 1 Rigo with Jewel Lotus, because actually Jewel Lotus can sack for triple white, and Rigo makes triple pips, which is white, white, white. And then you can play your Rigo turn 1, you can play your Ornithopter turn 1 with a land drop, you can play Absence Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Curse Catcher. These creatures who are, I would say, days on the stick, they're super good because people can't interact with them. You would need specifically like a Stifle or something, or you need the requisite mana to pay for them. I was running a game with a fellow homie, Connor. Shout out to Connor. And I had a Curse Catcher, I had a Muslin Wanderer out, and I had a Judge's Familiar out. And he was like, dude, there's a fucking miscast on the board. Like, what am I supposed to do? Also, I tried to find the coolest and the most expensive versions of the card for this list. So if you're looking to play this budget, maybe I might adjust it to budget. But this is cool as fuck. And as a hype piece to wear Supreme, shout out to James Jebbia. This card is fucking insanely hot. It's quite a pretty penny. We got Mausoleum Wanderer, Sidisi's Faithful. Pretty hot tech I picked up in MOC Season 1. It was in my Blue Farm list. I don't know if they're still running it anymore, but it's a decent fetch off of Ranger Captain. If you're in a pinch and you need to remove a problematic creature or something like that, then you can just, remove the opponent's Dranith, because the win condition is turns. The win condition is turns. And what you're going to be doing is looping those turns with with Ephemerate. So you're going to be looping those turns with Ephemerate and Archaeomancer or Eternal Witness. So what you're going to do is you're going to cast you've already played your Archaeomancer. You're going to cast this extra turn spell. Take an extra turn after this. Boom. Done. It resolved. You're very good at the game. It's already resolved. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go to Ephemerate. Exile target creature you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it has rebound, which is very key. So you're going to rebound. You're actually going to Ephemerate targeting Archaeomancer. Archaeomancer is going to pick up Temporal Manipulation. So now you have a Temporal Manipulation in your hand, and then you have an Ephemerate in exile ready to rebound. So at the beginning of the upkeep, you're gonna cast Ephemerate for free, targeting your Archaeomancer. And then once Ephemerate resolves, Ephemerate will be in the graveyard. So then Archaeomancer can't target the Ephemerate, which means the Ephemerate can go back to your hand. And then you go to your main phase, you cast Temporal Manipulation, it goes to the graveyard, and with the new Ephemerate in your hand, you can retarget Archaeomancer, flicker Archaeomancer, pick up Temporal Manipulation, Ephemerate's in exile, cast Temporal Manipulation whenever you want, and then you have a loop here with Temporal Manipulation and Archaeomancer. This loop also works with Eternal Witness. It works even better with Eternal Witness. Displacer Kitten is also a really good engine for this deck because you can just chain instant sorceries, the minimal artifacts that we have in this deck. You can just chain them, and maybe you can flicker your Archaeomancer. It might be a little costly, but you'll be able to loop turn spells this way if you have the requisite mana to do so. Maybe the way that I explained it it might have been inefficient, but you'll be able to find an efficient way once you get the hang of it. I also have Bring to Light in here, which is a card I've really been wanting to play for a long time. Bring to Light can also jumpstart the combo because we have ways to make 5 colored mana. We have the Mox Diamond, Lotus Petal, Druid's Repository. Druid's Repository is sick. I have City of Brass here. I have Exotic Orchard. Mana Confluence. Also Smothering Tithe. There's also a ridiculous loop because I'm a Storm player at heart. Sometimes I might even just pivot to a Archaeomancer, Displacer Kitten, and Time Twister line where you have Smothering Tithe out. You have Smothering Tithe whenever an opponent draws a card that player may pay 2. If we're being really honest here, nobody's playing that goddamn 2. If they don't, you create a colorless Treasure Artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any one color. So, when you Time Twister, everyone will draw 7. You're going to make 21 treasures because each opponent draws 7 cards. Some of them aren't going to pay. And then, at that point, why would you pay? Extra mana is extra mana. And if you make 15 mana, you have fuck all to do with it. Which means you can probably cast another non-creature spell like 3 visits. Displacer Kitten will trigger. This will trigger Archaeomancer, ETB, pick up Time Twister, recast Time Twister. Shuffle up, draw your cards, start over again, etc., etc. It's usually easier to do it with the Ranger Captain active on board, with this ability activated, Grand Demolisher on board. It's really crucial for you to have that because your opponents will draw 7 cards each time you do that. So maybe they might even come up with a Force of Will or a Mind Break Trap because your 7 that you're drawing is very random. And it's not sculpted. But you can mitigate this by making sure you fetch. You prioritize fetches. You're grabbing the cards out of your deck that you don't want, like 3 visits. If you have say a Jeweled Lotus on the field, you might not want to crack it because it might dilute your draws. Lotus Petal as well. At a certain point where you're just going to be drawing so many cards because of Rigo and all of your 1/1s here, you're going to probably end up with a full grip if you get enough tempo. And, you're going to have maybe a discount from Baral. You might be able to flash something back with the other side of Jace. You may cast a target instant sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. That card will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. That also helps you with turns. Although it exiles it, it's pretty decent to just take another turn. Time Walk's banned for a reason. And, because you're doing it for 5 mana, doesn't make it any different, honestly. There's also this +1 ability here. Up to one target creature gives -2/-0 until your next turn, which means you can turn a Ranger Captain into a 1/3, which then triggers off a Rigo. You can also do that with Rigo. You can target Rigo, which then triggers on himself. There's certain cards you don't want to like swing into everybody. If you don't want to swing into something, maybe deterring blocks by making an opponent's thing like -2/-0 will help you get in better. Yeah, it's a really cool deck, very fun. It's very straightforward. It accomplishes a lot. I would say one of the hottest cards in this deck is March's Swirling Mist, because normally when you remove a creature, blue is famous for bouncing things. But when you phase them out and you're taking extra turns, they don't come back until your opponent gets another turn. So if you keep taking extra turns, those creatures will not come back until they get another turn, which likely they won't. And also because Rigo is very pip heavy or very color intensive, because you want a Rigo and you also want one of your color intensive 1-drops to be on the battlefield. I'm running a bunch of free interaction. So you got Pact Negation, you got Mental Misstep. Most of it's all 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, and then you have Daze, which is free. Fierce Guardianship, Force of Negation, Force of Vigor, Mind Break Trap, Force of Will, Misdirection. Everything's here, with the exception of Delay and Unsubstantiate. It could easily be something else. Not sure until I get around it. I recently took out Dovin's Veto. Still reworking the counterspell suite here, or the interaction suite here. I'm just looking for more free spells or more 1-drop spells. I just think Delay's underplayed. People need to counter creatures now. It's not a joke anymore. People go undetected and they just go uncounterable. Like, sure, I'm gonna drop all these creatures. Who cares? So you got Delay and Unsubstantiate in here to stop that. Mind Break Trap also stops that. Force of Will, Misdirection might help with that. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Even Daze does that. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. It's really good to cast Daze when your opponent's really in the tank and they're really thinking about their turn and about how they're going to win the game, and they're like counting up their mana and they're like, oh, I got it figured out, and they finally go for it, and you're like, cool, Daze, and they're like, well, I'm off 1 mana. What do I do? Because people think when you play Daze, you're just supposed to completely stop somebody. That's not exactly the case, like in other formats. In cEDH, people usually have the mana to pay for it. This deck is very good against like turbo decks or decks that are like very playing low to the ground and they have to count every single bit of their mana to go off. So I would say Daze is probably one of those cards that are really good into turbo metas. It's also really good against inexperienced players. It's also really good against people who think very, very hard about their turns. So overall, this card is pretty decent. I usually find myself tapping out just to cast Rigo and swing. So the cards that I draw I want those cards to be live. Like, say like I have 5 mana on like turn 2 or something like that, something ridiculous. And I swing and I get a Pact Negation. I will be able to pay for that on my next turn, although I'm tapped out. I want to be able to do things as I'm tapped out. Mental Misstep, can use that as I'm tapped out. Daze. Again, like, Force of Vigor. If somebody casts Breach, they go for the Brain Freeze line. You can just Force of Vigor that and just get them out of here. GG, I was actually thinking about adding the Solitude. I was thinking about adding Solitude because it's, a piece of interaction that I can exile and, delete a creature for free, essentially. I think I should probably be running that. Originally, all of these rocks weren't here. When I realized how many cards I was drawing per turn, I realized I was running out of mana quickly because I was running Collector Oath. And I was also running Stony Silence. got a expiration, sometimes I'm drawing multiple lands per turn. It'll be easier for me to just drop them down and keep the turn moving. Mr. Gamora, of course, typical Wild Growth. We need those colored pips. Counterbalance when you're tapped out. Like I said, you might not have the interaction in hand, but if Counterbalance is on board, then that might help. This deck runs a lot of one and two drops. Yeah, so my pit, I would say all my permanents are very high on like one drops. Then it's followed by 2, then 3, and then 4 and 5, which aren't that many. 1/7 drop, that is Seagate Restoration. It's okay. Could run something else, but I've looped Seagate Restoration with this deck a few times, and I don't know how I got there, but it's good. It's very good. Sylvan Library, as I was saying, I think I was saying earlier on Twitter that you need to, as a non-black deck, draw cards. With Sylvan Library, you need to take that 8. Take it. Just take it. Just take the 8. Draw your 3 cards. It's free. Even if the cards are trash. I've learned this from the Command Zone before. From the Command Zone, they were saying like, hey, if I look at Sylvan Library and I see the cards and 2 out of those 3 cards are trash, I would put them back on top of my library. The thing is, you don't want to put them on top of your library. As I learned from the Command Zone, you want to rip all of those cards off, because then you'll see a new fresh 3 on your next turn that comes out. Druid Repositories here. Regardless if I'm drawing cards or not, this is a bank. It's a giant bank, and it does everything you need it to do. Once it's down and once you've made your investment for 3 mana and an attack phase, it's insane. Especially if you've been accumulating a bunch of 1/1s over the last 3 turns or so. Here, anything noteworthy in lands is Yabi Maya, because once you run out of fetchable targets because you're drawing so many fucking cards, you're gonna need to have your lands tapped for mana. You're gonna run out of fetchable targets. If you're playing this deck correctly, you will run out of fetchable targets. I have a forest in here, an island. I'm thinking about putting a plains in here. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but blue and green are our primary colors here. Horizon Canopies here just to draw a card. That might actually be a plains. I was always looking for an extra card. I was kind of hungry for an extra card. Sometimes that extra card does make the difference. Horizon Canopy is that good. I do have to say, but that card might just be a plains. There's no need to run a Tainted Pact mana base if I'm running no Tainted Pact at all. I don't want to get shut down by any land hate or anything that says, hey, you can't play fetches like an opposition agent. I don't want to get shut down. But yeah, this is the deck so far. It's very fun. It's very streamlined. It's very user-friendly. Once you learn the combo with Archaeomancer and Eternal Witness, and you learn how to loop, the deck is really easy. Jace is a fucking house. Also a 0/2 which you can attack with. You'll never really feel out of the game because you're swinging and you're drawing cards and you have a bunch of free spells that you can use. Also shout out Into the North because they put me back on the misdirection. I think in their recent podcast, the die roll, I can't remember who mentioned it, but they mentioned misdirection about, tapping out. I think it was Noobsaurus. And I think they were talking about playing Baral and how they were, they want to have all this interaction in their hand if they're playing their commander on curve. I try to get Rigo out as quickly as possible. And, for the most of the time, just tapped out. And shout out to Noobsaurus, I'm also playing Baral. And as for considerations, I'm really excited to talk about this. It's Approach of the Second Sun. Shout out to Skylar for suggesting this. The thing is, I play in a lot of tournament CDH, and games, or I would say usually in tournaments, there's usually a caveat of like, hey, if you're taking an extra turn on your last turn, turn's over. If I'm continuously taking extra turns and say like I have like, I don't know, 5 minutes left in the round, I'm running a bunch of 1-1s. I'm gonna take a little bit to kill everyone. Approach to the Second Sun might close out the game a little faster if I'm running it, and I think it might deserve a place in this deck. Knowing that, I was also running Temporal Trespass because sometimes I would need an extra turn, but I didn't quite have 5 mana. And I always had a bunch of cards in my graveyard, and delving them away off of like a Time Twister or something like that, with the Time Twister to follow up was amazing, because I wouldn't have to draw those cards again. I've also been looking into playing Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, Doba's Veto. Yeah, I would probably put these in right now. Alright, nice. But yeah, this deck's really fun. You never feel like you're out of the game with this deck, and I'm gonna make room for Approach of the Second Sun. You convinced me, Skylar. You are a genius, and I feel like this is a good deck for me to run it in. Because not a lot of CDH decks are trying to run Approach of the Second Sun. Oh, I'm sorry. Once in your draw step 3 during your combat phase, so you're drawing 4, and you can dig so easily. Approach to the Second Sun was cast from your hand. If you cast another spell named Approach to the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach to the Second Sun, this owner's library, 7 from the top. So, you draw a card for turn. You swing for 3 creatures, you draw 3 cards, so you've drawn a total of 4 cards this turn. You take an extra turn. You go to your next turn, you draw a 5th card. You go to combat, you draw 8 cards. You've already drawn the Approach of the Second Sun, you cast it, and you win the game. It's easy, right? If you need more mana, you can just take extra turns. Like, it's easy. It's easy claps. Also, notable exclusion. I'm not running Gaia's Cradle. One of Skylar's solutions for the hefty cost on Approach of the Second Sun was Gaia's Cradle. And I'm running a bunch of 1-drops here. Running a hefty amount of 1-drops. So I'm having 8, 12. I'm running 15. I'm running 15 1-drops, which can equal hella mana off of Gaia's Cradle. The reason why I'm not running it is because if I draw Gaia's Cradle turn 1, I'm not going to make any mana. And I want to be making mana expeditiously. I want to make sure that mana comes out immediately. I want to be casting that Wild Growth. I'm ready for that turn 2 Rigo. I'm ready for it. It's alright. I would say probably something else in land base. I could probably run an Otawara. Otawara is pretty solid. It might end up costing me 3, maybe even 2, or maybe 2 or maybe 1, because I only have 3 legendary creatures in this deck. Yeah, and I never felt very comfortable to play Otawara, but we'll see. Maybe I might make the cut one day. But yeah, thanks for sticking by and sitting through this Supreme Bant deck tech. Make sure you view that primer. Get caught up on some streetwear culture here. It's amazing. Yeah, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you like the content, and have a great day. Later.